I'm Maude Taylor, 67 years old and 5 years a widow. The Thanksgiving dinner I hosted last year was supposed to be about family gratitude and togetherness. Instead, it became the day my own children disowned me. Right there between the turkey and pumpkin pie, they broke my heart after decades of sacrifice. But what they didn't expect was the envelope I had prepared. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and prepare yourself for a story about family betrayal that might feel too familiar. Frank and I met when I was just 19, fresh out of high school in our small town of Riverdale. He was 23, handsome as could be with those deep blue eyes that our eldest daughter Judith later inherited. We married within a year, built our life brick by brick, just like the houses his construction company would eventually build. 42 years we had together before his heart gave out one quiet Tuesday morning. Our 3 children were my proudest accomplishments. Judith, now 45, was always the perfectionist. First in her class through high school, graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, and now a corporate executive at a pharmaceutical company in Chicago. She married Thomas, an accountant, and they have 2 teenagers, Emma and Jackson. Judith was always calculating, always planning her next move. Andrew came 2 years after Judith. At 43, he still hadn't quite found his footing in life. 3 failed marriages left him bitter. The first to his college sweetheart ended when she caught him cheating. The second lasted barely 2 years before financial troubles tore them apart. His third wife left after his gambling debts mounted to unmanageable levels. Despite everything, Frank and I were always there with open checkbooks and open arms. Our youngest, Sophia, is 38 now, always the artistic one, painting beautiful landscapes that Frank would proudly hang in his office. More practical than Andrew, but less driven than Judith, she found a balance as an art teacher at the local high school. She never married, but has a beautiful daughter. My 10-year-old granddaughter Lily, from a relationship with a musician who left before Lily was born. Frank built his construction business from nothing. Starting with small renovation projects, he eventually secured contracts for commercial buildings across 3 states. We weren't wealthy by national standards, but in our community we were comfortable enough that our children never wanted for anything. Frank made sure of that. While Frank built buildings, I built our home. I turned down a nursing scholarship to raise our children. Every school play, every baseball game, every skinned knee and broken heart, I was there. When Judith needed extra tutoring for calculus, I took a part-time job at the library to pay for it. When Andrew wanted to attend hockey camp, I sold my grandmother's silver to make it happen. When Sophia needed specialized art classes, I drove her 2 hours each way, twice a week for 3 years. The sacrifices never felt like sacrifices then. They were investments in my children's futures, in their happiness. Frank and I both believed that. After the children left home, Frank and I planned to travel. We had a map with pushpins marking all the places we would visit when he retired. But retirement came with a diagnosis instead: cardiomyopathy, progressive heart failure. 2 years of watching my vibrant husband fade away until that Tuesday morning, when I woke to find him gone peaceful in his sleep, but gone nonetheless. Frank left us well provided for. The family home was paid off. There were substantial savings, his life insurance policy, and the business, which his partner bought out. It wasn't millions, but it was security. I became the trustee of everything responsible for an estate that our children seemed increasingly interested in as the years passed. Looking back, the signs were there even at Frank's funeral. Between tears, Judith asked about the will. Andrew inquired about his father's watches and cufflinks before we'd even returned from the cemetery. Only Sophia seemed genuinely lost in grief, clutching Lily's hand as they placed flowers on the casket. I was too consumed by my own grief to notice then how their eyes calculated even as they comforted me, how they measured their inheritance even as they measured my sorrow. The 5 years after Frank's death were a slow awakening. Grief counseling helped me find my footing in this unwanted new life. At my counselor's suggestion, I joined a support group for widows and widowers. That's where I met Walter. Walter lost his wife of 50 years to cancer. A retired high school principal with a kind smile and gentle manner, he understood the empty spaces grief leaves behind. We became friends. Nothing romantic at first, just two people who spoke the same language of loss. We'd meet for coffee, attend community events together, or simply sit in comfortable silence, reading books at the local park. As my friendship with Walter grew, so did my children's disapproval. It began with subtle comments from Judith. "Mom, don't you think it's a bit soon to be running around with another man?" It had been 3 years since Frank died. Then came Andrew's remarks at Sunday dinner. "This Walter guy sure seems interested in Dad's house. Bet he's counting the square footage when you invite him over." Walter had never been inside my home at that point. Sophia, initially supportive, gradually aligned with her siblings. "Lily was confused seeing you holding hands with Walter at the mall. She says she doesn't want a new grandpa." Walter and I had helped Lily find birthday presents for Sophia. We hadn't held hands. Their disapproval coincided with increasing requests for financial assistance. Judith, despite her 6-figure salary, wanted me to fund Emma's private school tuition. "It's what Dad would have wanted," she insisted, though Frank had always valued public education. Andrew's requests were more desperate. Gambling debts, back child support, a new business venture that needed investors. Each time the amount grew larger. Sophia's needs seemed most legitimate. Money for Lily's education fund assistance, with rent when the school cut back her hours. I helped gladly setting up a separate account for Lily's college that only I could access. 2 months before Thanksgiving, I hosted a family dinner. Nothing special, just a Sunday roast and family time. After dessert, I excused myself to the bathroom, but stopped when I overheard voices from Frank's old study. "The house has to be worth at least $800,000 now," Andrew was saying. "The business buyout was structured over 10 years, Judith replied. "There should be at least 4 more payments of $150,000 each." "What about the lake property?" Sophia asked. "Dad always said that would be mine someday." "We'll split everything 3 ways, Judith stated firmly. "Once we convince Mom she can't manage on her own anymore." I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. They were discussing my assets, not their father's legacy, but my life, my security. Planning to declare me incompetent, I, who still volunteered 20 hours a week, managed all my own finances, and had just returned from a solo trip to the Grand Canyon. The next day, I called Jonathan Fieldman, our family attorney for 30 years. After explaining the situation, I requested changes to my estate planning. Jonathan was concerned but supportive. "Maude, are you sure about this? This is a significant change." "I've never been more sure of anything, Jonathan." I also met with my financial advisor, Marilyn Chen, who helped me document every dollar I'd given my children since Frank's death. The totals were staggering: $145,000 to Judith, $237,000 to Andrew, and $89,000 to Sophia. With Marilyn and Jonathan's help, I prepared 3 identical manila envelopes. Each contained a complete accounting of all financial assistance provided to that child. Excerpts from Frank's personal journal about his hopes for our children's character development. A new estate plan showing charitable donations to replace individual inheritances. A letter. Explaining my decision, I placed these envelopes in my desk drawer and waited for Thanksgiving, trying to ignore the heaviness in my heart. For the first time, I saw my children clearly, and it hurt more than words can express. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and cold. I woke at 5 to begin preparations. The turkey needed to be in the oven by 7, potatoes peeled, cranberry sauce made from scratch, just like Frank's mother taught me. The dining room table was set with my best china crystal glasses, that Frank and I received for our wedding, and sterling silver candlesticks that had belonged to my grandmother. Walter called around 9. "Are you sure you don't want me to come over? Even just to help with preparations?" "I appreciate it, but this needs to be family only," I told him. "I'll call you tomorrow and tell you everything." "I'll be thinking of you all day," he said gently. "Remember, you deserve respect, Maude." Judith and her family arrived first, precisely at noon. She immediately began rearranging the appetizer trays I'd prepared. "Mom, you've put far too much food out. We'll spoil our appetites," she said, though I'd been hosting Thanksgiving for longer than she'd been alive. Thomas gave me a quick hug before disappearing into the living room to watch football. Emma and Jackson barely looked up from their phones, mumbling rehearsed greetings. Emma, at 16, wore makeup that aged her by 10 years. Jackson, 14, had grown at least 3 inches since I'd last seen him. Andrew arrived 30 minutes late, already smelling of bourbon, at 1 in the afternoon. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements jerky as he pulled me into an overly tight hug. "How's my favorite mother?" he slurred slightly, patting my back too hard. "I'm your only mother, Andrew," I replied evenly. "And thank God for that." He laughed too loudly. "One of you is expensive enough." Sophia and Lily arrived last. Lily ran to hug me, her small arms tight around my waist. "Grandma, I made you something." She handed me a hand-painted card with a turkey made from her handprint. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, thank you." I bent to kiss her forehead. Sophia gave me a quick, stiff hug. "Mom." She looked thin shadows under her eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. Throughout the afternoon, I noticed my children whispering among themselves, conversations stopping abruptly when I approached. Judith kept the grandchildren busy in the family room away from me. Andrew made multiple trips to his car, returning each time with freshened breath but less steady on his feet. Sophia kept checking her phone, jumping whenever it buzzed. The kitchen, normally my domain, had been invaded by Judith, who insisted on helping by questioning every recipe and method I'd used for decades. "Mom, nobody adds cream to mashed potatoes anymore. It's so unhealthy." "The turkey looks dry. Did you baste it properly? Should the stuffing really be that consistency?" I bit my tongue, focusing on the meal rather than the criticism. As I worked, memories of past Thanksgivings floated through my mind. Frank carving the turkey with exaggerated ceremony, toddler. Andrew covered in cranberry sauce, teenage Judith, proudly presenting her first homemade pie, young Sophia creating elaborate place cards for everyone. Where had those children gone? At 3:30 we gathered around the table. Andrew swayed slightly as he took his seat. Judith directed everyone to their places, as if it were her home. Sophia kept Lily close beside her, away from me at the other end of the table. I remained standing at the head of the table, Frank's old spot, and looked at the faces of my family. Despite everything, I felt a surge of love for them. They were still my children, still the babies I had nursed, the toddlers I had taught to walk, the teenagers whose hearts I had helped mend. I hoped in that moment that I was wrong about what was coming. "Before we eat," I said, "I'd like us all to share something we're thankful for." "I'll start. I'm thankful for family, for memories, and for the truth, even when it's painful." My children exchanged glances across the beautifully set table. No one spoke. Dinner began with forced conversation about safe topics. Weather, traffic, the neighbor's new fence. I carved the turkey as Frank once did, serving each plate with care. The food was perfect, but few seemed to notice. Andrew gulped his wine rather than eating. Judith picked at her food while checking her watch repeatedly. Sophia barely ate focused, instead on cutting Lily's turkey into tiny pieces. Only the grandchildren ate with enthusiasm. Halfway through the meal, Andrew cleared his throat. "So, Mom, have you thought more about downsizing? This big house for just one person seems wasteful." I took a sip of water. "I'm quite comfortable here." Judith jumped in. It's not about comfort, Mom. It's about practicality. This house has stairs maintenance issues. At your age, you should be thinking about somewhere more manageable. At my age, I repeated. I'm 67, not 97. I still do yoga 3 times a week. But the expenses, Andrew pressed. Property taxes, utilities, repairs. That's money being wasted that could be what, Andrew? I asked quietly. He stuffed a forkful of stuffing into his mouth instead of answering. Sophia spoke next, her voice trembling slightly. Mom, Lily's private school tuition is due next month. I hate to ask, but with my hours cut back. Before I could respond, Judith interjected. Speaking of money, Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about Dad's life insurance policy. As the eldest, I think I should be added to the account as a co-trustee. For what purpose? I asked. For security, in case something happens to you, or in case you're influenced by outside parties. You mean Walter, I stated flatly. He's clearly after your money, Andrew slurred. Why else would a man be interested in a woman your age? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Perhaps for the same reasons your father was interested in me for 42 years. Companionship, respect, love. Dad was different, Sophia said softly. How exactly? I challenged. Silence fell over the table. Emma and Jackson exchanged uncomfortable glances. Lily looked confused. Thomas studied his plate intensely. We've discussed this as a family, Judith finally said, setting down her fork with precision. We're concerned about your judgment lately. My judgment. The trips, the new clothes, the spending. And this friendship with Walter. It's not appropriate. Dad would be heartbroken. I looked at my eldest daughter, trying to recognize the little girl who once asked me to check her closet for monsters. Your father would want me to be happy, Judith. Not at our expense, Andrew muttered. Excuse me, I asked. Andrew's face flushed red. You heard me. You're burning through our inheritance with your finding yourself lifestyle. Your inheritance. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Sophia began to cry quietly. Lily needs that money for college. I've been counting on it. The room fell silent, except for Sophia's sniffles. Then Judith pushed her chair back and stood. Her face was composed, her voice steady, as she delivered the words that would forever change our family. We, as your children, have decided to cut you out of this family. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. We've consulted with an attorney, she continued. We have documentation of your erratic behavior, your excessive spending, and your inappropriate relationship. We're prepared to petition for conservatorship if necessary. Your what? I whispered. It's for your own good, Andrew added, attempting seriousness despite his intoxication. You're not thinking clearly. You've become selfish with what should be our inheritance, Judith continued. You're disrespecting Dad's memory by gallivanting with Walter. You've withheld financial support when we needed it. And you've been difficult and distant since Dad died, Sophia added, though she wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at each of my children's faces, searching for any sign of the people I raised. Instead, I saw only strangers wearing familiar features united by greed rather than love. And then, surprising even myself, I began to laugh. It wasn't hysterical laughter, but genuine amusement mixed with profound sadness. The absurdity of the situation, being disowned at my own Thanksgiving table in my own home by the children I had sacrificed everything for, struck me as darkly comic. My laughter clearly unnerved them. Judith's confident posture faltered. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. Sophia's tears stopped as confusion replaced sadness. Mom, Judith said uncertainly. I composed myself and stood slowly. Excuse me for a moment. I walked calmly to my study, opened the desk drawer, and retrieved the 3 manila envelopes I had prepared. When I returned to the dining room, all eyes were on me. I've listened to what you have to say, I said quietly. Now I have something for each of you. I handed each of my children an envelope, keeping my expression neutral. Go ahead. Open them. The room fell silent as my children opened their envelopes. I remained standing, watching their expressions transform as they examined the contents. Judith opened hers first, methodical as always. Her perfectly manicured nails carefully broke the seal, her expression composed until she began reading. I watched as her face transitioned from confident to confused to alarmed. She flipped through the pages with increasing speed, her breathing becoming shallow. Andrew tore his envelope open sloppily, some papers spilling onto his gravy-covered plate. He squinted at the document's alcohol, making it difficult for him to focus. As comprehension dawned, his face flushed deep red, then drained to ashen white. He looked up at me, mouth opening and closing without words. Sophia opened hers, last hands trembling. As she read, tears filled her eyes again, but these were different tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, a small gasp escaping as she reached the letter. "What is this?" Judith finally asked, her voice having lost its authoritative edge. "A complete accounting," I replied calmly. "The first page shows every dollar I've given each of you since your father died. Judith, you've received $145,000 for Emma's private school, Jackson's sports camps, and your vacation home down payment." Judith swallowed hard, glancing at Thomas, whose eyes had widened in surprise. Clearly, he hadn't known the extent of her requests. "Andrew, your total is $237,000. Gambling debts, failed business ventures, legal fees for your divorces, and the BMW you insisted you needed." Andrew stared at his hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Sophia, your $89,000 went mostly to Lily's education and your apartment when you were struggling. I've never begrudged helping my granddaughter." Sophia's tears fell onto the papers. "The second document contains excerpts from your father's personal journal. He kept one for years, though I doubt any of you knew that. He wrote extensively about his hopes for each of you, his concerns, his dreams. He specifically mentioned not wanting to leave large inheritances that might stunt your growth as responsible adults." His words, not mine. I paused, letting that sink in. "The third document is my revised estate plan. I've established charitable foundations in each of your names: the Judith Taylor Scholarship for Women in Science, the Andrew Taylor Fund for Addiction Recovery, the Sophia and Lily Taylor Arts Education Grant. Each will receive 1/3 of my estate upon my death." Judith's face hardened. "You can't do this." "I already have," I replied. "It's done. The paperwork is filed. My attorney and financial advisor have copies of everything." "We'll contest it," Andrew blurted, desperation in his voice. "You can try," I acknowledged, "but the documentation of your behavior, including today's attempt to declare me incompetent, won't play well in court." "Mom," Sophia whispered, "I didn't know about the conservatorship thing. Judith said we were just going to talk to you." Judith shot her a venomous look. "The final document is a letter," I continued. "I wrote each of you individually expressing my love for you despite everything. I detailed my disappointment, yes, but also my hope that we might find our way back to being a real family someday." I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what needed to be said. "I raised you to be better than this. Your father and I gave you everything we could, not just financially, but emotionally. We taught you about integrity, kindness, gratitude. Somewhere along the way, you forgot those lessons." Andrew started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. You came here today to cut me out of the family, to threaten me with legal action if I don't hand over what you see as your entitlement. Let me be perfectly clear. That's not how family works. That's not how love works." I looked at each of them directly, one by one. "I'm selling this house. I've already accepted an offer, in fact. I'm buying a condo on the beach, and I'm going to live the rest of my life on my terms." The shock on their faces was palpable. "As for cutting me out of the family, you don't have that power. I will always be your mother. I will always love you. But from now on, my love comes with boundaries. You will respect me or you will not have access to me. It's that simple." I turned to the grandchildren who had been watching with wide, confused eyes. "Emma, Jackson, Lily, none of this is your fault. I will always be your grandmother, and you are always welcome in my life. When you're old enough to make your own decisions about our relationship, I'll be waiting." With that, I sat back down and calmly served myself another helping of mashed potatoes. "You can stay and finish your meal, or you can leave. The choice is yours. But this conversation is over." The exodus began with Judith. She stood abruptly, napkin thrown onto her half-eaten meal. "Come on, Thomas. Kids, we're leaving." Thomas hesitated, looking at me with what seemed like a newfound respect. "Judith, maybe we should—" "Now, Thomas." Her tone left no room for discussion. Emma and Jackson rose reluctantly, confusion clear on their young faces. "Goodbye, Grandma," Emma whispered as she passed my chair. "This isn't goodbye, sweetheart," I told her gently. "Just see you later." Judith ushered her family out without another word, the front door slamming behind them hard enough to rattle the china cabinet. Andrew sat motionless, staring at his documents with unfocused eyes. Then suddenly he pounded his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "This is bullshit," he slurred. "After everything I've been through, I deserve that money." "What exactly have you been through, Andrew?" I asked quietly. "And what have you done to deserve anything?" His face contorted with rage. He stood knocking over his chair in the process and began a tirade of slurred accusations and obscenities that I won't repeat. Thomas, who had just returned to collect a forgotten purse, quickly intervened. "That's enough, Andrew. Let me drive you home." "I don't need your help," Andrew snarled, but his unsteady gait contradicted his words. Thomas gave me an apologetic look as he guided my son out the door. "I'm sorry, Maude, for everything." And then only Sophia remained still seated with Lily pressed against her side. "Mom," she began, her voice breaking. "I didn't know they were planning this. I swear. Judith said we needed to talk to you about Walter's influence. That's all." I studied my youngest child's face, searching for truth. "Yet you went along with it." She looked down. "I was desperate. The school cut my hours again. Lily's tuition is due. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have been honest with me," I said. "Just asked for help without the manipulation." Tears streamed down her face. "I know. I'm so sorry." Lily looked between us, her small face crumpled with worry. "Are you mad at Mommy Grandma? Is everyone fighting because of me?" I reached across the table and took her little hand. "No, sweetheart. Not because of you. Adults sometimes make mistakes. Big mistakes. But we'll figure it out." Sophia gathered her things slowly. "What happens now?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That depends on all of us." After they left, I stood alone in my dining room, surrounded by abandoned plates of food, half-empty wine glasses, and the scattered remains of my family relationships. The beautiful meal I'd spent days preparing lay mostly uneaten. I began cleaning mechanically, scraping food into the garbage, loading the dishwasher, putting leftovers into containers no one would be coming back to claim. As I worked, the magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. I had stood up to my children. I had seen them clearly for who they had become. I had drawn boundaries that should have been drawn years ago. I felt simultaneously heartbroken and relieved. When the kitchen was spotless, I poured myself a small glass of wine and called Walter. "It's over," I said when he answered. "How bad?" he asked gently. "About as bad as expected. Maybe worse." "Do you want me to come over?" I thought for a moment. "Yes, And bring ice cream. Walter arrived 30 minutes later with 2 pints of butter pecan, my favorite. We sat in the living room eating directly from the containers while I recounted the entire confrontation. "I'm proud of you," he said when I finished. "That took tremendous courage." "It doesn't feel like courage," I admitted. "It feels like failure. Where did I go wrong with them, Walter?" He considered this thoughtfully. "You didn't go wrong, Maude. People make their own choices. Your children are adults who chose greed over gratitude, entitlement over love. That's not on you." As the evening progressed, I felt a strange lightness replacing the heaviness in my chest. The worst had happened. My children had rejected me, attempted to manipulate and control me, and yet I was still standing. The fear of losing them had always controlled me, but now that it had actually happened, I discovered I was stronger than I knew. The weeks following Thanksgiving brought a flurry of communications, each revealing more about my children's true characters. Andrew called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that transitioned from angry to pleading as his financial situation deteriorated. "Mom, please, I need help. Just a small loan until I get back on my feet. I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." I didn't return his calls. Judith took a different approach. Her attorney contacted Jonathan with threats of legal action, claiming emotional distress and broken promises. Jonathan assured me the claims had no legal standing. "She's fishing Maude," he told me. "There's nothing here that would hold up in court." Sophia was the only one who reached out directly, sending a text asking if we could meet for coffee. I wasn't ready yet and told her I needed time. December brought the sale of the family home, faster than expected thanks to a cash offer, and my move to a beachfront condo 30 miles away. The 2-bedroom unit had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, a small balcony where I could drink my morning coffee, and no stairs to navigate as I aged. I spent my first Christmas in 50 years without any of my children. Walter invited me to join his family dinner, but I declined, needing solitude to process my grief. Instead, I volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals to those with no homes or families to return to. Their gratitude for simple kindness put my own situation into perspective. In late January, I received an unexpected visitor. Lily stood outside my door, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest. "Grandma!" she exclaimed when I opened the door. "I found you." "Lily." "How did you get here?" I asked, alarmed. "I took the bus," she said proudly. "I saved my allowance. Mom thinks I'm at Zoe's house studying." I ushered her inside, immediately calling Sophia, who was frantic with worry when she discovered Lily wasn't where she was supposed to be. "She's with me," I assured her. "She's safe. I'll bring her home." The drive to Sophia's apartment gave Lily and me time to talk. She told me how much she missed me, how confusing the past months had been. "Mom cries a lot," she confided, "and she won't talk about you or Thanksgiving, but I heard her telling Aunt Judith that she was wrong." When we arrived at Sophia's, my daughter stood in the doorway, torn between relief at seeing Lily safe and discomfort at facing me. "Thank you for bringing her back," she said stiffly. I nodded, turning to leave. "Mom," she called after me, "would you like to come in for a cup of tea?" It was a small olive branch, but it was something. The next 6 months brought significant changes to my life and relationships. My beachfront condo became a sanctuary, a place entirely my own, decorated to my taste without considering Frank's preferences or preserving things for the children to inherit someday. I filled my days with purpose, volunteering 20 hours a week at a youth center teaching art and literacy. The children there approached creativity without judgment, took pleasure in small achievements, and expressed gratitude freely. All the things my own children seemed to have forgotten. Walter and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something that defied simple labels. Not quite romantic partners, but more than friends we enjoyed. Concerts, traveled to national parks, and spent quiet evenings discussing books or watching old films. He never pressured me, for more respecting that my heart was still healing on multiple fronts. My encounters with my children evolved differently with each one. A chance meeting with Sophia occurred at a grocery store 3 months after Thanksgiving. We literally bumped carts, turning into the same aisle. After an awkward greeting, I invited her to join me for coffee at the in-store cafe. The conversation was stilted at first, but gradually warmed as we steered away from difficult topics. "Lily misses you," she said as we prepared to leave. "Would it be okay if I brought her to visit sometime?" This began a cautious reconciliation. First brief visits with Lily present as a buffer, then longer conversations where Sophia finally admitted the full extent of Judith's manipulation. "She convinced us you were being taken advantage of by Walter," Sophia explained during one visit. "Said we needed to intervene before you gave away our inheritance. She had documents prepared beforehand. I never read them closely. I just signed where she told me to." "You're an adult, Sophia," I reminded her. "You made your own choice." "I know," she acknowledged, "and I'm sorry, truly." By summer, we had established a fragile new relationship, not the same as before, but perhaps more honest. Andrew's journey took a different path. In April, he called sounding more sober and centered than I'd heard in years. "Mom, I've been in rehab for 8 weeks," he told me, "working through a 12-step program. Step 9 is making amends, and you're at the top of my list." I agreed to meet him at a public park, unsure what to expect. The man who approached my bench looked physically different. Thinner, clearer-eyed, his movements deliberate rather than jittery. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said after we'd talked for an hour. "What I did, what we all did, was unforgivable. But I want you to know I'm changing. Really changing this time." "What prompted this, I asked. "Rock bottom," he said simply. "After Thanksgiving, I went on a bender that ended with me in the hospital. When I got out, no one would help me. Not my ex-wives, not Judith, not my so-called friends. I realized I'd burned every bridge. The only option was to finally help myself." I didn't offer financial assistance, and surprisingly, he didn't ask for any. Instead, he asked if he could call me occasionally just to talk. I agreed to this small reconnection. In June, Andrew called with news his girlfriend was pregnant. "It's a boy," he said, voice filled with wonder and terror. "I'm going to be a father again, at 44, and this time I need to get it right." Judith remained conspicuously absent from my life. Her attorney eventually stopped contacting Jonathan after it became clear there was no legal case to pursue. The grandchildren, however, found ways to reach out. Emma, now 17, connected with me through social media, sending occasional messages and photos. Jackson called once when his parents were out just to say hello. 1 year after the fateful Thanksgiving, I hosted a small dinner at my condo. Sophia and Lily came bringing homemade cranberry sauce. Andrew arrived with Sarah, his girlfriend, her rounded belly, holding my future grandson. Walter was there too, now comfortably accepted by my reconciling family members. Judith's absence was felt, but not discussed. We all understood that healing happens at different rates for different people, if it happens at all. As we sat around my new dining table, smaller than the old one but large enough for those who chose to be present, I looked at the faces of my family. Not the family I had imagined I'd have at this stage of life, but family nonetheless. I had learned profound lessons about setting boundaries, about the difference between helping and enabling, about the courage required to stand up for yourself, even against those you love most. Most importantly, I had learned that family isn't defined by obligation or blood alone, but by respect, honesty, and genuine care for one another's well-being. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights I cried myself to sleep, questioning my decisions and mourning the relationships I thought I had. There had been days I wanted to give in to buy back my children's affection with the inheritance they coveted. But standing firm had given all of us an opportunity to build something more authentic. As I looked around my table that night, I realized that the greatest gift I had given my children wasn't financial security or unwavering support. It was finally showing them that love without respect isn't really love at all. That painful lesson had cost us all dearly, but for those sitting at my table, it had ultimately led to growth. I still had the envelopes I had prepared the previous year. I had made copies for myself, occasionally rereading Frank's journal entries when I needed his wisdom. He had written something that continued to guide me. The best inheritance we can leave our children is the example of living with integrity. By standing my ground that Thanksgiving Day, I had finally honored that wisdom. And in doing so, I had begun writing a new chapter in our family story, one based on truth rather than obligation, on earned trust rather than assumed entitlement. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the most necessary ones. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that might be.